Today, we'll delve into the case of a girl who went to her Sunday school and disappeared without a trace. The police and hundreds of volunteers searched everywhere but couldn't find her. This mystery remained unsolved for a whopping 48 years until an unexpected twist helped reveal the shocking truth. Gretchen Harrington was born on June 13, 1967, in Pennsylvania. She was the youngest of 3 daughters. Soon after her birth, the family moved to the small town of Bumo. Her father, a pastor, got a job at the local church. Gretchen immediately loved this town. She spent a lot of time outdoors with her sisters and new friends. Bumo was a safe place, so parents weren't afraid to let their children play outside until dark. With its rich nature and close-knit community, it was like a paradise for kids raised in a religious family. Gretchen spent a lot of time at her father's church and excelled in Sunday school, always getting top grades. On the morning of August 15, 1975, when Gretchen was 8 years old, her family eagerly awaited the arrival of her mother and newborn sister from the hospital. Gretchen wanted to wait for them too, but her father encouraged her not to miss Sunday school to keep her perfect grades. Reluctantly, she agreed, took her Bible, and headed to church. Usually, she walked there with her older sisters, but they both stayed home that morning. Gretchen wasn't afraid to walk alone as the church was less than a mile away, just an 8-minute walk from her house. The Sunday school lessons consisted of 2 parts. First, the children gathered at Trinity Church, and after about an hour and a half, some of them headed to Gretchen's father's church. But at 11:30 a.m., when the kids arrived at the second church, Gretchen's father noticed that his daughter was not among them. It seemed strange because the children were brought as a group. He thought Gretchen might have stayed at the other church, so he called there. The wife of the pastor, David, who taught at the Sunday school, answered the call. She said Gretchen wasn't there and informed her husband. He was surprised because Gretchen hadn't even attended his classes that morning. Her father immediately started to worry. He asked David to call the police and went searching for his daughter. He drove along the route between the churches, checked other streets nearby, but Gretchen was nowhere to be found. He also reached out to her friend's parents, hoping she might have decided to spend time with some of them, but they were all either at church or home. Gretchen's best friend, David's daughter, also hadn't seen her all day. The police immediately began searching. As news of Gretchen's disappearance spread through the town, hundreds of volunteers quickly joined in. Practically all the locals knew Gretchen's father as they regularly attended his church, so they all wanted to help. Together with the volunteers, the police searched the entire town and then started combing through multiple wooded areas and the riverbank. A police helicopter was also sent to assist, scanning the area from above. The search continued into the night, but yielded no results. The next day, even more volunteers joined in. The police created flyers with Gretchen's photo and information about her disappearance, which were posted along roads and handed out to passing drivers. Despite all efforts, the police not only failed to find Gretchen but couldn't even determine what happened to her. After several days of searching, they didn't find any significant leads at all, and Gretchen's fate remained unknown. Her disappearance became a heavy blow to the local community. People were used to letting their children roam the streets freely from a young age, and nothing like this had ever happened before. The kids could spend hours wandering in the woods and swimming in the river without adult supervision, and their parents never worried. But now, all of that was in the past. The fact that no one knew what happened to Gretchen only added to their fear. People discussed various theories. Some thought she might have run away from home. Others believed she went swimming in the river and drowned. But the most frightening theory was that someone had abducted her. Parents stopped letting their children out unsupervised. One local woman even cut her daughter's long hair so she would resemble a boy. Once a safe and peaceful town, overnight it became a place where people lived in uncertainty and fear. The police also questioned anyone who might have had any connection to Gretchen's disappearance. During these conversations, they received several intriguing leads. One witness reported seeing a girl resembling Gretchen near the church that morning. A green station wagon approached her, but the witness didn't see what happened next. Another person shared a similar story, but this time they said a white Cadillac approached the girl. The police followed up on these leads, checking the owners of all vehicles matching the descriptions in the area, but couldn't establish their involvement. 4 days after Gretchen's disappearance, detectives got a new lead. A resident of Westchester, located 30 minutes away from Bumo, called the police and said that he had found children's shorts matching the description of Gretchen's clothing. Investigators immediately showed them to Gretchen's mother, but she said they didn't belong to her daughter. From then on, there was no progress in the case. For several weeks, the police called off the search operation and focused on the investigation. They continued interviewing people and following up on any available leads, but with each passing day, their hope of finding Gretchen alive diminished. This continued for 2 months until October 14th, when a chilling call came into the police. A man went for a jog in a large national park about a 20-minute drive from Bumo. There, he noticed something strange in the bushes. At first, he didn't realize what it was, but when he came closer, he suddenly realized it was a human body. He immediately ran to the park rangers to inform them of the discovery, and they called the police. Officers quickly realized the remains were those of a child, but due to the extent of decomposition, identifying the child was extremely challenging. Detectives assumed it might be Gretchen, so they showed her parents photos of the clothing that had been left carefully folded next to the remains. Gretchen's mother immediately confirmed that the clothes belonged to her daughter because she had made them herself. Soon, forensic experts confirmed it was indeed Gretchen by matching the remains with her dental records. They also determined that the cause of death was multiple severe blows to the head, and the case was reclassified as a homicide. Due to the level of decomposition, they couldn't determine any other details, including whether the victim had been sexually assaulted. Moreover, DNA analysis didn't exist in 1975, so investigators were once again left without any clues. News of the murder reignited the attention of the local community, and the police began receiving even more tips. People realized that a dangerous criminal could still be among them, so everyone wanted to see the perpetrator brought to justice as soon as possible. Investigators received dozens of tips about suspicious men spotted in the park area where Gretchen's body was found, but all these tips led to dead ends. They also checked everyone living within a few-mile radius who had a history of violent crimes, but this yielded no results either. Several months after the discovery of the body, the case completely stalled with no new developments. Over the following years, the investigation was reopened from time to time. Detectives reviewed all available tips and leads, but each time it ended with no results. The main problem was that detectives had no evidence at all. Even when the police began using DNA analysis, it didn't help in this particular case because no foreign samples were found on Gretchen's remains or her clothing. As a result, the case remained unsolved for many decades. It was occasionally mentioned in newspapers and featured on TV, but only in recent years did Gretchen's murder once again ignite wide public attention. 2 journalists, Joanna and Mike, decided to write a book about the crime. They worked on it for several years, gathering all available information piece by piece and trying to uncover new facts. Both journalists grew up in Bumo and were roughly the same age as Gretchen at the time of her murder. Joanna, who was only 9 at the time, remembered the case vividly because it impacted her life and the entire town. After Gretchen's disappearance, children could no longer roam the streets or leave home unsupervised. The fear that the perpetrator might strike again haunted the community for many years. Even young children felt how their lives had suddenly changed, and they remembered Gretchen's case throughout the years. To write the book, Joanna and Mike secured access to the case documents and spoke with many individuals involved in the case. They carefully pieced together the events of those days, detailing the entire story. The book was released in 2022 and immediately attracted significant attention to the case. However, its major impact came months later when a woman contacted the police to discuss Gretchen's case. She met with the leading detective to share her story. The woman, who was 10 years old at the time, lived in Havertone, just a short distance from Gretchen's home. She was friends with Gretchen and her older sisters, as well as numerous other kids in the area. She often stayed over at friends' houses, and one night while staying at the house of 2 sisters, she woke up in the middle of the night to an adult male entering the room. She was afraid to tell anyone about it and stayed in the house for another night. The same thing happened again. An adult male entered the room. The following morning, she told one of the sisters what had happened. To her surprise, the sister said it happened quite frequently. The girl also mentioned that the adult male sometimes came to her sister at night. When she returned home, she told her parents everything. However, instead of going to the police, her parents simply prohibited her from visiting her friend's house anymore. All of this occurred just a week before Gretchen's disappearance. After telling her story, the woman disclosed the name of the man involved, David Zanstra, the same pastor who taught at the Sunday school. But that wasn't the end of her story. She also revealed that a month after Gretchen's disappearance, one of her friends was approached twice by a man who attempted to lure her. The girl refused to get into his car and later told her friends that it was Zanstra who tried to persuade her. To corroborate her statement, the woman showed detectives her personal diary from that time. On September 15, 1975, she had written about her friend's plea to keep it a secret, fearing that David Zanstra might cause harm. Upon receiving this information, the police immediately reopened the investigation. Reviewing the case materials, detectives uncovered several suspicious facts that indirectly implicated David Zanstra. For instance, it was Zanstra who had reported Gretchen's disappearance to the police. He provided investigators with a detailed description of Gretchen's clothing: dark blue zip-up shorts with front studs and pockets without zippers or buttons, and a white top with her hair in braids. At the same time, he claimed not to have seen Gretchen that day. This raised a reasonable question. How could he know what clothes she wore that morning, especially since after her body was found, David's descriptions were confirmed as accurate? The detectives also learned that the Sunday school classes started about 50 minutes late because Zanstra didn't arrive at the church at the usual time. This meant he would have had enough time to take Gretchen, dispose of her body in the park, and return to the church to start his lessons. According to David's account, he drove some of the children in his van to her father's church after the Sunday school classes. He claimed he didn't see Gretchen that morning and only noticed her absence when her father mentioned it. Another detail was that David, along with his family, moved to another state just a few months after Gretchen disappeared. David also owned several vehicles, including a green station wagon. A witness had reported seeing a similar vehicle near the church on the day Gretchen vanished. Piecing together this information, the detectives decided to question David. At that time, he was 83 years old and lived in Georgia. They traveled there on July 17, 2023, and met him at the police station. When David realized the detectives suspected him, he began to deny everything and asked what evidence they had. The detectives told him they had testimony from a woman who had stayed at his house and reported inappropriate behavior, and that there were stories about him involving his own children. David was initially stunned, but he soon began to speak. He confessed that on the morning of the incident, he drove to Gretchen's father's church in his green station wagon and saw her leaving her house. He waited until there were no witnesses around, approached her, and offered her a ride. Gretchen got into his car, as she knew him well, and was on her way to his Sunday school classes. Instead of taking her to the church, he drove her to a deserted park area. He stopped the car and told her to undress. When Gretchen refused and said she wanted to go home, David struck her several times on the head, causing her to lose consciousness. He then moved her body to another park and covered it with branches. Afterward, David returned to the church to start his classes. Following his confession, the police arrested David for Gretchen's case and extradited him to Pennsylvania. He was placed in jail awaiting trial. The police then began a deeper investigation into his past, given that he had worked as a pastor in many different locations. They took his DNA sample and started searching for matches in other unsolved cases, including disappearances in areas where David had worked. Investigators found a possible connection to the disappearance of 4-year-old Amanda Campbell from California in 1991. Amanda vanished from her home in a quiet neighborhood where David had worked as a pastor. Although there is currently no evidence linking David to this case, the police are investigating due to the similarities. The trial for Gretchen's case has not yet begun. It's possible that the legal process could be prolonged, which may delay the trial for years. There is no guarantee of when a verdict might be reached. Alright, share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you for watching.